The first question would be, yeah, like what does it mean to listen to a place in your practice? No, which is kind of like the common thread of most of the texts.
Yeah, so the assignment we got was of course already really close to a place, because it was this pavilion that was related to the text. It is a difficult question, because actually you could say everything you make is influenced by the place, and not necessarily the place you're at while you're writing, but the place you're from. And for me, the Grammar of Ruins, the text I wrote, was about this idea that if you're so clearly from a space, if everyone is so clearly from a place, what is then the place that the writer and the reader meet? And that is the text itself. And then I try to explore what the space is that we share. And the funny thing, it's also in a sense like time travel, because we will only share this space like not at the same time. So I already address someone in the future who is also in a place. And the text is like the thing in between us. So for me, I try to find a way in which a place that is actually very banal, the place I'm in, but endlessly fascinating for me, I guess I try to make it also interesting for others. I don't know. I really mean in the sense that what does place mean for me, or the place I work in it's very simple. I work at home, in a sense in my house, but also in the city I am at home. So I cannot even separate my work from this place. And I think you can also see that in the piece I wrote. That would be actually the answer.
Yeah, but I mean, you're focusing a lot on the place, but actually, like, what do you listen on a place, or like in when you write about something, what sounds or what resonates of a place in your writing?
No, this is what I was actually wanted to say, and it sounds a bit esoteric, but if you ask like what are you listening for me it's patterns. So I see all these things that repeat again and again, and that are very I think bound to place. So you have patterns of red brick everywhere here, like all the facades of the houses are made of this red brick. And after living more than 20 years in a place, you know how they look in the afternoon, you know how they look in the early morning, you know how they look in the autumn, in the sun. And so I try to add these layers of information and history to this information that is more stored in the senses, like not necessarily haptical, but as you said, in imagery for me. That is how I look at the world, mostly. Is that a bit of an answer, in a sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the text really talked for itself, so it's difficult to make a question like text. But so I know from Rike that we have in common that you've been interested in cities and thinking space for a while. I made like a very long intro. In your text, you write about the city as a space that has already been lost. I sense the nostalgic tone, but not a romantic one, as if you aim to restore the city, but rather a reflective nostalgia, in which you dwell this loss through the imperfect process of remembrance. After you linger on the ruins and fragments of the city, in the end of the text, more or less, you suddenly call upon the body, and you ask yourself whether it makes sense to move. So I was wondering, what is the relationship you see between loss, city, and movement?
In a very obvious way, the city changing and getting older means the same for yourself and your body. So you know when I was a teenager, this building was still here, and now it's gone. So there's a weird way in which your body and the city coincide through memory. And at the same time, there's, I think, for me, there's an awareness of a privilege of living in a city that is that could harbor so many people, that could offer so much shelter, and doesn't do that. So that, I think, is a bit what you say about this, or this idea of loss. So you're in a space and you can see what it could be, and you also see what it isn't. And this is all, and this is especially something you see when you enjoy a place, like all the things it isn't, or all the things it doesn't offer, it very exclusively offers only to a few people. And I think that that is how they come together, these things. Yeah. And actually the next step is what could you then do? And that's not something I'm yet there, I guess. No, this actually, I would say this is my answer. That if you enjoy something and see how beautiful it is, there's always also this regret that it is often the case that it's very exclusive. But it's only for a small group.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you've never moved, no? Like you've never lived anywhere else.
No.
Even in the Netherlands.
No, I always lived in the city. So I went to other cities for a few months, but never longer than 3 months. That was actually the longest I lived somewhere else. And I did try to write about this a little bit in this piece, and I think it also, because I wrote it in Berlin actually, in 2018. So it's already like a third place, thinking about these two other places, the place, thinking about Amsterdam, and also thinking about what this place would be, the reader would be, situated at the moment of reading. And I think in a way if you don't have to, of course, this is all if you even have this choice, but in a sense, you might need quite strong roots to be able to move again and again if it's not a necessity. And for me, I guess, even though I know this place very well and I love it very much, apparently it's not, how would you call it? It's not in a sense safe or mine, or I don't feel that it's there if I leave. So, yeah. It's also if you don't watch it, it will be gone, in a sense. Which is true, of course, because you will miss all these things. But yeah, I don't know if it's a sensible way of living, but this is what I've done so far.
Well, yeah.
You moved a lot, actually, didn't you? You moved a lot throughout your life. As if writing happens in a space that is nowhere. Actually, this is where I started this text with that's simply untrue. It doesn't exist like a text or a space that is only made through words, or that is abstract and only on the page. It's always first filtered through the writer, and then through the text, and then through the reader. So I thought it was very nice to already make this gesture, like, let's not pretend that we're like without a body and without a home and without a place, even if we do this. And then the next question for me was, what would that add? Not pretending this. So not pretending that text is like a incorporeal, like a means of communication that leaves the body out of the equation. What can you then do? And still keep it in a way that everyone is addressed, every potential reader, in a way. But I have to think of it because we are telling, because we're thinking about our own work and careers, or as far as you can talk about careers. But then you realize how it's, yeah, maybe it's not so simple. It's so based on where you are. And if you're talking about like listening to what does it mean to listen to a space, maybe a question for you. Do you think something is interesting that doesn't incorporate this realization for you?
Again, do
you find a work of art or a visual work or a text interesting that tries to leave out these traces of where it's made? Or is it even possible?
See, no, I don't think, first of all, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible, but I do think that we have like different, like listening is differentiated. Like it's differentiated by class, by gender, by race, you know. So it's interesting to know what you listen to, and like what is that it's putting, like, because sometimes it's invisible, no? This part of all these sounds that are incorporated in the work. Some people make it very explicit, but I really like subtle gestures as well, like really, really subtle, in which all these elements that you're listening based on who you are, basically, and where you are, that you put it in the work, no? So that's why we thought it was interesting to think about listening in that way, no? Like we all listen according to our own histories, our own place in the world, no, where we are situated. And I think most of the texts were very situated. And I mean, most of the writers are women, and I was wondering if that was also like a gender way of approaching the task, no?
Yeah, well, I was actually just a minute ago thinking, because you're saying about that all these texts use the position of the writer necessarily. Because that's the person who's making the text, but they're also a filter. I was just wondering if a reader, for example, could know from my text that I'm a woman. Not necessarily. It doesn't say anything but I think people will assume, to be honest. So I am interested in how on the one hand, yes, you are a filter, but how can you maybe use this to make a text that is not necessarily about you, but does totally incorporate this fact that you're in a certain concrete situation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, and I think it happens. It happens all the time. I mean, I think the reflections are intertwined, like these very personal, but at the same time, from this very personal experience, something very, I don't like to talk in terms of universal, but like these other shared experience, like you can see that kind of, like you can see through that, no? It's not only like somebody talking about their own lives. I really like the quotes you put of Ethel Adnam.
Oh yeah.
No, and for example, no, I mean, and she has super interesting books. She has one of cities and feminism, and cities and women. Yeah, I don't know. I really connected to the quote that says, "Each tear repressed returns as a wave, a buzz mist, a storm, a day gone, a sunset. The sea repeats herself, like repeated its one's absence to this world's promise." And I don't know. I mean, I think Adele is quite personal, but at the same time, her writing crosses the personal.
Yeah. No, I think this quote. What I liked about this book, I was reading it a lot at the time I was writing, and then one other example, of course, of being situated is that you cannot, like, what you read comes into your work. You cannot like stop it or even contain it or somehow. And I was reading this particular book, Sea and Fog, or poetry collection. And I love how she almost shamelessly or seamlessly connect this metaphysical world with her impression of a sunset or a sea, together with this this space that is for most people feels separated as a bus mist or very small things, and I like how she makes them.
Yeah.
Fluid would be, I guess, the right word to say. Yeah, and I thought it's very inspiring also. So I think she takes it fair. Actually, you should ask her this question: what does it mean to listen to space? Or you could say her work is an answer to that question. Very much.
Yeah, it was super nice. To go back to her through your text. I mean, that's also what I really like about the text, that it gives a lot of space to other voices, but we know that they are kind of your notes, so they're like your underlinings or your takes on that. No.
Yeah. So, no, it is very. As a writer, I think it's also sometimes if you you also think. I sometimes feel like this sounds really wrong. More like a DJ, and then you don't want to play other people's greatest hits, and then I mean your work is always lost, of course, between the best of other people's work. But at the same time, it's like these brilliant sentences and poems that make you think and want to write in the first place. So you need to find a very little, for me, writing is finding a very little space in between there. And also often if I write, it's actually what is left is what I've written between these quotes. So in the next stage, not in this text because I put them in very consciously, but in many essays, I write the quotes disappear. And then they were good building blocks, the support, but they were needed to make the text, but they're not in the end. Mm. This is another way in which the place you are in the sense of your own references is always part of course, what you make. I
think that's that starts to happen in one of the blogs, actually, in the one that you quote Horace in the Ode. And then you start taking the quotes, but then that takes you to this really beautiful idea that he made something more durable than both stone and language, no? And it's this kind of reflection that builds from this quote, but then
it's almost ironic how what he described, he went even beyond what he described himself as already being the highest achievement possible. This language as lasting as stone. Yeah, that's true. They already merge. I wanted to make one comment still, because we were talking about whether a text is personal or impersonal. One thing I didn't mention, and I feel a bit guilty about, is that of course I'm also bound to this place because of my family. No, then it sounds as a negative thing, but I'm bound here because of the people I love. So this was not mentioned. I mentioned bricks and trees, but not my family. So maybe it's good to do that too. Yeah.
To include people.
What?
To include people in the equation.
Yeah, indeed.